Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back to the shop. It's good to see you again. This time around, we're working on a Treadle grinder. It's more of a sharpening stone. It's kind of a fine stone rather than a coarse grit stone, but it's what I need for the new smithy. This isn't going to be an authentic restoration. It's going to be more of a recycled rebuild. We're going to use recycled and used parts and as many of the old parts from the grinder as we can to rebuild it, to get it back into working condition. So stick with me, should be fun. And to keep the video a little shorter, we're going to do this in a couple of parts. So today, we're going to rebuild the crankshaft for the grinding stone. All right, guys, let's get to it. Stick with me, should be fun. All right, guys, here's our stone. It's a 24-inch stone, but it's a little out of round, so we'll end up taking a little bit of that off. It'll end up probably being about 21 inches when we're done. So this old flange is all busted up. It's a cast iron thing. It's set out in the weather for a very long time. And we're not going to be able to reuse much of this axle. So when these stones were made, they put a square hole in the center. And they made these flanges with little ears on them. And they would center them up best they could. And basically cement them into place. It's kind of a plaster that they use to hold that hub in place. So we're going to chip all that out, make it back to a square hole. And what we're going to do is build a square hub to fit into that hole so that we're not concreting this thing into place and trying to center it up. And what we're going to do is we need something that's got a large shaft that's threaded so that we can duplicate that. So a couple of pieces of angle iron, and we're going to take this old tow ball off an old trailer and we're going to machine it down to fit inside. This will give us enough material to create an axle on either side for a bearing, and we'll be able to drill a hole through the center for our pedal crankshaft, which is a much smaller shaft. So this will end up being sort of the central part of the hub. And I was surprised that steel was fairly easy to machine. I thought it would be a little more dense or a little higher carbon, but it seemed just to be mild steel. This happened to be a 2 1/4 inch tow ball, rated at 6,000 pounds before I did this to it. Anyway, there we go. We drilled a 5/8 inch hole through it, and that's where our inner shaft will come out both sides so that we can put our cranks that go to the connecting rods and ultimately down to the pedals when it's assembled. And we're just facing this off and cleaning it up. And that's the nut we'll be using to replace the nut on the old hub. And we ultimately ended up deciding not to use the lock washer. It just took up too much space and it really isn't necessary. Alright, so this will be a bearing surface on one side. And we're going to use these pillow block bearings that we had left over from the surface grinder build. There we go. And we can get that welded into our angle iron. I've got several of these tow balls kicking around from things that I've just picked up over the years. And I've used them for a couple of different things, but never anything like this, so I'm glad we'll be able to recycle some of this stuff. There we go. Get it all welded into place, cool it off, get some of the splatter off this thing, and see how she fits. So what we're going to do is take the flange and we cut it off the end of our crankshaft, and this one will drill out the center. And as I was drilling out the center of this, there was a small insert that was the center part that was pressed into place. So I had to put a piece of copper pipe, and I just sort of squished it into place with a press. and then machined it off to bring it back down to that 1-inch dimension that I needed. And that'll be our flange that'll go on the bolt side. Alright, and this is the old crankshaft that's on the grinder stand that we're going to have to rebuild. And what we'll end up doing is taking the flange off of the other side of this, and we'll attach it permanently to our new hub and crankshaft. And I was really surprised, a lot of these screws and bolts just came apart. They were it's like they're soft enough iron to just sort of let go of the rust. Some of them weren't. Those old bearings are no good, so we're going to use some new pillow block bearings. Like I said, the ones left over from the surface grinder build. There we go. And this isn't going to come out of here that way. Yeah, it's not moving that way. Yeah, we'll just smack it on the vise here and see if we can get it to just come apart. Yeah. There we go. We'll just break it off. How's that? I get it with a bandsaw. There we go. So this is one of our cranks that connects to the foot pedal. And this is the other flange we need. Now this one was pretty close to a 1-inch hole in it already, but we had a little machining to do to clean up both faces, and we're going to go ahead and run a 1-inch bit through it to size it anyway. And then we'll cut that little flange off the back of it once it's cleaned up. And it was pretty quick work. Didn't take much. So we have our 2 flanges, we have our square hub, and a hole through the middle for the crank. There we go. Now this flange is permanently affixed. We're going to go ahead and silver solder it on. And this is silver solder flux. It'll help that silver solder flow between these 2 parts. And I think we're going to need a helping hand with this one, just to hold things in place. That silver solder tends to bubble up underneath. It'll push that thing up. There we go. All done. Got her cooled off. And we'll try her out here. We've got to clean up the surface a little bit. It's kind of lumpy and bumpy from the leftover concrete that they used. And it's really not a concrete, it's more of a plaster. It's a little softer, but it's gritty like concrete. There we go. Seems to fit pretty good. We'll get the nut on the other side of this thing. And we'll do a little bench test here to see if it's running true side to side. Now we know it's out of round because it's been weathered from sitting on the ground for many, many years outside. There we go. All right. So our little makeshift bench here is pretty versatile. Spin this thing, you can see the big lump in the up and down, but what we're concerned about is the side to side here, and it seems to be running fairly true. So it looks as if we may have got our hub built close enough. Alright, you can see the axle down at the bottom that I just put through. See how that would fit. And what we're going to do is size this thing for a couple of mounts to mount it on the frame. And once it's mounted on the frame and aligned and all that, we'll go ahead and weld in our central crank rod. Alright, these used to be a sort of a wedged fit onto the old shaft. So we're going to drill the centers of them out, make them round, and then just put a set screw in either side, and we'll use some of the original screws that were on the bearing mounts that we won't be using there because we've got new bearings. There we go. Alright, these are our new bearing mounts, and these are our leftover bearings. So we'll bolt all this together, and we will just set this right on top of the frame where the old bearings went, get the wheel in it, line everything up, and weld them into place. We'll let the wheel tell us where they need to be. It's anything with a rebuild, restoration, you're using new parts, scrap parts, recycled parts. The machine itself will pretty much tell you where it wants things to be. You just have to listen to it. There we go. Right about there. Get everything lined up side to side. I got my little wrench on there so I can tilt it back and forth, make sure it's nice and straight. Check the wheel for center. And we could have rebuilt the bearings that were on it. They're easy to do, and they were intended to be rebuilt, but this was much easier, and the mounts were actually bad for the old bearings. So let's just give it a fresh look. It'll spin a lot easier, a lot smoother. Alright, we're going to go ahead and weld in the central crank rod. This is what our foot pedal cranks will attach to. And we'll simply drill some divots on either end of that rod that are 180 degrees out. Put our screws in, and they'll sit in those divots. There we go. Alrighty, guys. Getting closer. Alright guys, we're going to stop it there for now. It's got a crankshaft in it. It's looking pretty good. I'm excited about the whole thing. If you'd like to see the video in its entirety now, you can run over to Patreon, and it's viewable there to patrons of the channel. So anyway guys, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for stopping by Big Dog Forge. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time right here at Big Dog Forge. Bye-bye now. Take care. Be safe.